Please note, the opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Tri-County Orthopedics. Any medical advice or treatment recommendations discussed should always be reviewed with your own healthcare provider. This podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the OrthoZone podcast, officially brought to you by Tri-County Orthopedics. My name is Dr. Charles Wang. I'm one of the orthopedic surgeons here at Tri-County. Today we have an exciting episode, one that I've been looking forward to for a while now, and featuring his first appearance, one of my mentors, colleagues, friends, and one of Tri-County original OGs here, Dr. Ken Montgomery. Dr. Montgomery, thank you for being here with us today.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
So I'm going to introduce Dr. Montgomery and brag about him a little bit because I know he would never do it. So Dr. Montgomery has been practicing here in northern New Jersey for almost 20 years?
Yeah, almost 20 years.
He is trained at the nation's top orthopedic hospital for special surgery, for his orthopedic surgery residency. And then he did a couple of fellowships, one with one of the founders of orthopedic sports medicine, Dr. James Nicholas, and then another fellowship at Harvard University. He specializes in sports medicine and upper extremity surgery. He is a former head team physician for the New York Jets and current team physician for the New York Jets. Also former team physician for the New York Islanders, former team physician for the U.S. Open. He is the president and co-founder of OrthoNations, which will be the subject of today's episode. You are a pilot, you drive boats, you travel the world. What else do you not do?
Well, there's lots of stuff I don't do because I don't have time to do anything else. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good introduction and summary. Thank you.
So I always joke around with people that I feel like you're the modern day Renaissance man because you do everything that I think we all want to do, but we just don't have time. So, and you balance this with a full-time job. So I don't know how you do it, but I think it's amazing. So today we're talking about OrthoNations, a nonprofit organization that you are the president of and you help co-found. And so we recently had the opportunity to go on the 2025 Vietnam trip, which was a great experience, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the episode. But first, before we get into it, I just want to know sort of the origin and the history of the organization, how you created it, why you created it, and when you created it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Charles. So OrthoNations, my initial experience actually was when I was a chief resident at the Hospital for Special Surgery. We had 6 weeks that we could go and do a rotation wherever we wanted to go. And I chose to work with a program that was called Orthopedics Overseas at that time. They had multiple countries that they had established relationships with. One of them was Vietnam, and that's the country that I chose to go to. I essentially went over there for 6 weeks, and then that was back when I was 31 years old, 32 years old. And at that time, went to 2 different hospitals, one in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, and then one in Central Vietnam Way, and worked 3 weeks at each of those hospitals. And during that time, made connections and contacts with a number of people. And it was a great experience, especially as a chief resident, to go over and work in the operating room and give lectures. And so that was an amazing experience. I had always wanted to go back and do it again. But the truth is that as I tried to write letters and be in contact with the different doctors that I worked with while I was there, I never got any correspondence coming back. And it's because the letter system and the name system over there was very complicated. And I don't think any of the letters that I sent ever got to anybody.
This was the days before social media.
Right.
So now it's very different.
Yeah, this was literally in 1995. So the internet was just starting, even here at that time, but certainly hadn't started over there. So the bottom line is I lost contact with all the people that I had been in contact with there. And then in 2013, all of a sudden I got a message via email from one of these doctors that I had worked with, a good friend of mine named Tree, who I had brought over to the United States back in 1995, and he sort of became our first OrthoNations fellow. He traveled with me around the country. He did part of my fellowship up in Harvard, a little bit of it at Lenox Hill, and then he stayed on and did some more work. Went on to have a very successful clinic. But he reached out to me to invite me to come back. And so with that connection, gave me the first opportunity to go back in 2015. So literally 20 years later, I went back with one of my fellows at that time, who was Teo Mendez, one of the other co-founders for OrthoNations. And what we did is we went to the same hospitals that I went to 20 years earlier, and it was an awesome experience. I was actually surprised how little things had changed in 20 years. The hospitals looked very much the same. A lot of the surgery that was being done was very similar. There was a lot of knee arthroscopy going on, not a lot of knee reconstructions arthroscopically. There was very little shoulder arthroscopy going on, even though they had the towers. So they were using the equipment, which was very different than 1994, where they didn't have any arthroscopic equipment. So anyways, at that time, we had an amazing experience, developed a whole new set of friends and colleagues at that time. Now, of course, at that time, the internet and email was really readily available in Vietnam, so it became very easy to sort of hold on to these connections. But with that trip, it was such a positive trip for Teo and I, with the camaraderie that we felt and the teaching, that we decided we need to do this every year. And the real idea for OrthoNations was that it's one thing for us to go over for a couple of weeks and do work, teach, do some operations, but that's such a short period of time to learn. And if you've ever had great lectures come into your hospital, your town, you can learn a lot from that, or an academy meeting or whatnot. But then once you're gone, then that educational experience is over. So what we felt was that to really make this a more durable learning experience for the doctors overseas was to bring them here to the United States. And so we have a surgical skills lab here at Tri-County Orthopedics through our surgery center. And then obviously we've got great teachers and educators. We're part of an educational program here at Lenox Hill. So it made it easy for us to conceptualize bringing doctors here and then doing a 8-week or 12-week residency here, where they observe us in the OR, they watch us take care of patients, and then importantly, we work with them in the surgical skills lab so that they can do more complex arthroscopic procedures, and then they can take all of that home. And that's a much more powerful and lasting experience for them.
Because they don't have those opportunities in Vietnam, right, where they can have a specimen, or we use cadavers here in this country to practice surgery and learn surgery in a sort of a safe environment. And talking to them, they're like, that's not a thing there. They have to learn on the go with real patients. So when they come over here, they are in the lab like every day learning and practicing. That's something that they don't have access to in their country. So it started with you and Dr. Mendez, 2 surgeons, and it's grown. So been on one trip, but I've seen other trips that you guys have done, and it's been like 20 plus people going now. So it's got to have grown a lot. Like back in 1994, that was 20 plus years ago now. I was learning how to walk back then. I was 3 years old. So the organization has grown a lot. The country itself has, you said some things are about the same, some things are different. What do you feel like they're still limited in terms of resources or maybe even like techniques? One of the cool things about our specialty is it's a very revolutionary and it's always changing. And every year you go to these conferences and there's always something new or a new surgery that we're doing. And so do you feel like that's something that they're adopting in their country and their practice?
Yeah. So we essentially started OrthoNations in 2015. So even though I went in 1994, 95, we didn't really start this program till 2015. And then since that time, with the exception of COVID year, we've been every year back to Vietnam. So in 2015, there was almost no shoulder arthroscopy being done. But now there's tons of shoulder arthroscopy being done in the hospitals that we have work with. And so when we go, they're doing arthroscopic cuff repairs and labral repairs and some significant procedures. And that's because they've come here and they've learned how to do those procedures. So they're really doing a lot of great stuff arthroscopically now, and that includes reconstructive surgery of the knees and even hip arthroscopy. Steve Hunt taught them how to do hip arthroscopy here in our lab. And so now there's a surgeon in Ho Chi Minh City who's doing hip arthroscopy. So they're doing a lot, but they do it with little. And so we have here in this country access to any kind of equipment that we need. The insurance companies pay for the implants that we put into people's bodies when they need something repaired. But in Vietnam, it's not that way. Limited resources make it so that they have a couple of anchors per case. Sometimes the patient has to pay for them, so they have to be really inexpensive. And so what we're doing, which I think is fun and interesting and challenging, is we're taking some of the things that are easier for us to do here because we've got the best implants and the best techs and the best reps, and we're doing them with low-end implants, or we're finding new novel techniques to do the same surgery but without the expensive equipment. And so that's, I think, our challenge in Vietnam and Nepal and many of these resource-poor countries is to teach what we do, but in a cost-effective, low-resource way. That's what we try to think of in the lab, right? We don't just want to give them the best equipment and have them be able to now go back home and not be able to do that procedure because it's impossible. I mean, I think that, as you know, we went and we did a few reverse shoulders when we were over there, and those are some of the first that were done in Vietnam, right? They've only recently got access to them, to the ability to put in reverse shoulder replacements. We did some complicated cases over there. I nicely always chose the room that had the easier cases and always threw you into the room that had the most challenging, difficult case with the hardware that had to be removed. But that comes with the senior privilege. But yeah, I mean, those are things that are great to see. You know, we had them come over and do a shoulder lab in the spring of this year, and then to go back and to do actual reverse shoulders. And you could see how many surgeons they had in the room. There must have been 15 surgeons in the room working with you, 4 of them scrubbed with you, and then 10 standing behind you with cell phones, videotaping. And it's a great experience to see.
And I think just for some context for our listeners, shoulder arthroplasty is very new relative to hip and knee replacements. So even though shoulder replacements, we've been doing it for, 50 plus years, only in the past 10 to 20 years is when things have started really revolutionizing and our implants have gotten better and our understanding of what we should be doing is getting better and it's becoming a lot less painful for patients. They have better outcomes. And so when we were there, they're starting to do a lot more shoulder arthroplasty. It's a very valuable tool because it's for a lot of patients who just don't have a lot of options left. And so when we were there, here in the US, we have a lot of different sizes, different implants, even custom implants for patients. There we were operating and I was like, all right, maybe we should change the size of this. And they're like, no, we have one size. And so I was like, all right, that makes our job easier, I guess, but also a little frustrating. So it's interesting to see, we're here, we have all these options. They're starting to develop it and probably in the future they'll also have more options, but you can see sort of that lag. But they, just from operating with them, they're great surgeons and I've learned a lot from them and we're definitely going to go into that later. But before that, going back to OrthoNations, you talked about the challenges that the surgeons in Vietnam and Nepal have. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered sort of founding this nonprofit, either financially or logistically, like when you're trying to go there, maybe send implants there or getting people on board to go with you there? Just for listeners who may want to, do their own nonprofit work, what are some of those challenges that you've encountered?
Yeah, whenever you're going to another country, then you have to always be very sensitive to the culture that you're moving into, right? So we kind of have this natural feeling that, okay, we're coming from this country with high-end medicine and we're the best and we know all this stuff and we're going to come in and we're going to teach you how to do the great stuff we do. And I think that, number one, we want to be very cautious in the way that we approach that. We want to make sure that we're approaching everyone as equals and colleagues and understand the limits that they have available to them and approach from within, right? So anything that they've been doing before, they've been doing because that's the way they've learned from their senior doctors and because that's what's available to them. So to come in and imply that what they're doing is not correct or the best is something we want to always be cautious of. And I think we've sort of find a good balance with that. Bringing implants in can be a challenge because some of these governments don't want these implants to come in because they have networks of how they get things into the country. And so even if we're donating implants to come into the country, it's one of these things that if we bring in too much, then we get looked at and it becomes a big challenge. Then we can bring nothing in. So we have to find the right way to get implants into the country and do it sort of both legally with the right letters and not ruffle the feathers of administrators and politicians who might see that as something that might infringe on something that they would prefer to be done in a different way. Naturally, with any nonprofit foundation, finances is always a big thing. OrthoNations is a nonprofit organization, so it takes in money from donors. So that's always something that every year we have a fundraiser. It's usually towards the end of the year. In the fall is when we start to reach out to our friends, colleagues, family, and everybody that we know, including, any interested patients who are willing to sort of donate to this kind of work. And the money that comes in to OrthoNations all gets used for the fellowship training. training. So as you know, when we go over, we pay our own ticket to go over there. We pay our own hotel. We pay all of our own expenses to go there. OrthoNations doesn't pay for that. What we do is we have, for example, 4 fellows coming, 2 from Nepal and 2 from Vietnam, coming next month. And they're going to be here for 10 weeks. We pay for their airfare. We pay for their hotel to stay at. We pay for their food. We pay for their car rental. That's what all of the resources for OrthoNations go to fund. So that's, essentially all of our money goes towards paying for these expenses for the fellowship. So listen, that's something that is always a challenge. It's something that every year I have to sit there and dig in and reach out to everybody that I know to try to get them to donate what they can. And, as with everything, there's no amount that's too small, and there's certainly no amount that's too big. We've never found that number yet. And then finally, getting people engaged, right? So that's always a challenge. It's a lot of work to coordinate all of this. You could see the amount of work that it took just to pull off one of these meetings, one of these trips. We had 19 people that went to our Nepal trip last year. It's a huge, huge number. It's a huge amount of coordination to do that. And then even to go where we're going to go next takes just manpower. So it's easier to get people to go on the trips because the trips are so meaningful, right? They're very interesting. You're going to amazing places. You have amazing relationships and experiences. And that's something that clinicians want to do because it's exciting and it's fun. It's a lot harder to get people to get on the phone and fundraise. It's harder to get people to help with the billing and the collection because that's just more drudgery work. So anyways, that's sort of the next steps of, and the harder steps of having a nonprofit, I think.
And we didn't touch on this before, but so it started out as going to Vietnam, but you've recently expanded to going to Nepal as well. So growing, and then so OrthoNations isn't just orthopedic surgeons. You guys are bringing in physical therapists, anesthesiologists, so it's becoming a little bit more multidisciplinary and, affecting more of a widespread medical community at these countries. So we're going to talk a little bit about our recent trip to Vietnam. So Dr. Montgomery and I were able to go to Vietnam for the 2025 OrthoNations trip. This happened last month, so June 6th to 15th. It was a great trip. I've never done any medical mission trips before. I've had opportunities to go. I just never was able to go. COVID sort of ruined that during my residency training because we did have opportunities to go to Haiti, but that ended because of COVID. So this was my first trip. I learned a lot. I got to see a lot. I've never been to Vietnam before. Got to see what the country was like. Everyone's very hospitable, welcoming. You're like a rock star there. Everyone knows you. The food is great. The culture is amazing. The history is very interesting and something that I sort of regret not learning about even more before I went. And so I was trying to do that while we were there, but we had a pretty jam-packed schedule. So even though we were there for 9 or 10 days, it was a pretty jam-packed trip. So we left the airport here at midnight, and to fly to the other side of the world, we had 2 flights, 1 layover, 2 flights. So it was like a 15-hour flight. We landed in Istanbul, and then we had about a 10-hour layover, and then we had another 15-hour flight to Vietnam. So we arrived to Vietnam like Saturday late afternoon. Our conference started Monday, so we had about 24 hours to really get adjusted. And I think that day we still went out. And I remember going onto the airplane and Dr. Montgomery was like, so what's your game plan for this flight? And I was like, sleep? And I never really thought about it. I was like, you have to strategically plan how much you're going to sleep so that when you get there, you're not sleeping during the day and awake at night. So I think that helped. We sort of game planned our sleep schedule so that when we arrived, we would be okay and not trying to catch up. Spent a day in Ho Chi Minh City, and then we took a flight from Ho Chi Minh City to Hue. So this year's trip, we were in one city, and that's not what's been happening in the past, correct? So I guess tell us a little bit about what you were doing in the past and now how it's changed to almost becoming like a whole country conference. People are flying in from these different cities in Vietnam, and we're all meeting together, and we're not the only ones doing lectures. They have other orthopedic surgeons coming in and also teaching us.
Yeah, that's a great question. What we used to do is we used to go to 2 or 3 different cities on each trip. So we'd go for 2 weeks and we'd spend, say, 4 days in one city, and then we'd travel to the next city and we would do another 4 or 5 days days there, and then we'd go up to Hanoi and do another 4 or 5 days. And that was great. And the value of that was we made contacts with all the cities. We got to see all of the cities. The disadvantage is we did the same thing over and over. We'd give the same lectures here, and then in this city, and then 5 days later in that city. And that really became very challenging. Number one, it took longer. So we would do a 2-week trip plus the weekends, so even longer than 14 days. And as we've expanded OrthoNations and we're trying to reach out to different countries, and now we're doing Nepal and Vietnam, and we're trying to bring in other countries as well, then trying to limit it to a 10-day, 1-week trip is going to allow us much more opportunity to do multiple different locations in a year's period of time. So to do that, what made most sense was to do exactly what you talked about, which is to pick a city, and then instead of just going to all these different cities, just say this year our OrthoNation symposium is going to be in Ho Chi Minh City or in Hue, where it was this year, and then invite doctors from all the other cities and other places in Vietnam to come and join us. And yes, they were also contributing to the symposium and giving lectures. And so it really gave us an opportunity to see doctors that we'd never seen before, because doctors from hospitals we've never visited before came, and we made great connections with them. And so now when we go back again, we have other places to go to and other people to connect with, other fellows to bring here that we would have never had a chance to connect with if we just go to the same places all the time. So it gives them an opportunity to travel away from their hospitals and go to this sort of nationwide symposium. And then also it just really opened it up for us, and it just makes it a much more effective use of our time. And so it was a nice transition, and I think from now moving forward, that's what we're going to be doing, is picking a city, that'll be the symposium site, and invite from outside of that city other doctors and physical therapists and, anesthesiologists to come and join.
In the city we went to, Hue, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, is it their third largest city, or is that Da Nang, which is right next to it?
Yeah, Hue was the original ancient capital of Vietnam, and so from the 1850s on, it was the capital of Vietnam. It's in central Vietnam, and so it's where the imperial city was. It's where all the emperors resided, and so historically, it's a fascinating city. It's got amazing architecture. It's got the emperor's tombs. It's got Perfume River. It's just an interesting, amazing place. But it's not one of their largest cities at this point. It's probably number 10 or 15 on the list. The other cities are bigger industrial cities. I mean, Ho Chi Minh City is by far the biggest, and then Da Nang is number 2, and then Hanoi is number 3, and then there's other ones that are like Haiphong and all of these others that are other bigger cities that we've been to, but Hue is central Vietnam, and it's just a very interesting and historic place to go to. But it is, from a medical standpoint, a huge medical community because it's in central Vietnam, and so it attracts the medicine from all of the local provinces that come to Hue Central Hospital, which is a high-end central hospital.
And so when we got there, the conference almost started immediately. You won an award for Outstanding Physician Scientist for Hue National Hospital, so congratulations on that. We immediately started with lectures. So we talked about, what we talk about in conferences here in the U.S., very cutting edge stuff, sort of things that we're learning about and incorporating in our practices now. We did a lot of knee lectures as well as shoulder lectures. And I think they were particularly interested with the shoulder stuff and the shoulder arthroplasty stuff that we were able to talk about, tips and tricks of how to do the surgery. And then we went into examining patients. One thing that I thought was pretty interesting is their patients are very grateful for us being there. So they would line up for all these patients for us. We would examine them. Super grateful, always thanked us. And then even off the schedule, we would be getting patients coming in and being like, can you check out my kid? So that was cool to see. And then we did some surgeries. We did some pretty cool surgeries. And we were able to split up amongst different rooms. And so you were in different rooms from what I was doing. What are some of the surgeries that you were taking part of?
We did shoulder arthroplasty, reverse total shoulder replacement, and then a few rotator cuff repairs. It's great to see rotator cuff repair surgery, which is a complex arthroscopic procedure, right? The open work is open work and has not, at least from an arthroplasty standpoint, is new to Vietnam. The arthroscopy stuff is technically very advanced and very challenging. And so it was great for me to work alongside our former fellows with Bao and others that were there and watch them do the surgery, and me just kind of assist them in their operating room and watch them do these complicated procedures that we know that years ago, several years ago, they would have never been able to approach, but watch them do it very well. And know that now that we're here giving this lecture, they're doing those procedures all the time at home. So I did, a few shoulder arthroscopies, including complex ones, and then the arthroplasty ones. I think we also did an ACL reconstruction. What was it that we did that was unique about that I forgot? Oh, no, we did a total knee without a tourniquet, right? So, yeah, I'm not used to doing that. We did a total knee replacement without a tourniquet, which was actually went fine. It was...
You sort of get used to it.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things about operating there is you're not going to be in your comfort zone here. A lot of us sort of develop a routine. You have the staff that you routinely work with. They know what they should be having available for you, where you like things positioned. But then you go to a whole nother country, a whole nother staff, whole nother language barrier. Everything's different. We're operating in sandals. We don't really do that here in the US. I mean, I guess I don't think you can do that. I think that's like a OSHA violation here. But the first surgery I did was an arthroscopic rotator cuff repair, and I just remember the unsettling feeling of my toes getting wet. And I was like, well, you just have to embrace the situation. And eventually you get used to it. And I think being there and being able to operate with their surgeons made me a better surgeon. You have to sort of get out of your comfort zone. And I think as a result, we can get a little bit more of a different experience. One of the things that we deal with when we're operating is you have to be able to handle stress and handle unexpected events during surgery, and how you respond to those, I think, is a measure of how good of a surgeon you are. So I think I've returned, and going in, you're like, oh, we're going there, we're going to teach them. But I think I've personally learned a lot from them and from being able to operate and doing this trip with them. The surgeries that I did, we did the arthroscopic rotator cuff repair. We did a reverse shoulder replacement, but in a patient who had a previous fracture of their shoulder. So we had to take out a bunch of hardware. That was a great experience. I think, one, it was a complex case. Two, I was in the OR with 5 other surgeons that were scrubbed in.
Those were prominent surgeons. Like those surgeons, one of those was like the director of orthopedics at the military hospital in Ho Chi Minh City.
And here in the US, we specialize in things. So we do a lot of like shoulder surgery or sports surgery, but they do everything. So these guys were coming in and they would do like crazy trauma cases. And the other thing with Vietnam is their traumas are a little bit different from ours. It's a lot of like motorcycle accidents, because that's how it's a lot more motorcyclists than people driving in cars. So a lot of pedestrians getting hit. They were telling me they do like pelvis surgeries, they do spine surgery, and that's not, what we really do in the US. It's becoming less and less common. So I was able to scrub in with them. They taught me a lot of tricks. I saw them bend a really hard metal plate with these big clamps in order to get hardware out. And I remember when they were doing that, like here in the US, we would break out another tray, basically get a drill that cuts the metal, and they bent the plate and twisted it like a helicopter and looked at me and said, Vietnam way. And I was like, this is pretty cool. I mean, I've never seen this before, but that's one of the things is there are things that we can learn that are resource friendly that we wouldn't really do here, but we could do here, and it actually may help us here as well. So that was a great surgery. It actually went pretty well. We saw the post-operative x-rays. And so I think that's one of the cool things that we were able to do is work with the surgeons, collaborate with their surgeons, and learn from them also. So besides the surgeries, we got to go to different places around the city to visit. We visited the
Imperial City.
Yeah. And got to see remnants of the war there, as well as their history that dates back into the 1800s. And then we drove down to Hoi An, which is a pretty big tourist area of Vietnam. We saw people from a lot of different countries there. It was beautiful. It was flooding there when we got there, but that was actually pretty nice because it made it not so hot. And we got to see the river there where the city is basically abutting. And the cool thing about that is, one, it's beautiful. Two, the shops and the stores were great. We got custom tailored suits, which was awesome and much cheaper and better quality than I probably could have afforded here in the US. And the food is great. So I have a couple questions for you. So what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten there in Vietnam? And what's your favorite food that you've ever eaten there?
Well, my favorite, there's a Vietnamese pancake that's made of sort of potato and egg, and then inside of it, it has seafood. That's one of my favorite. Of course, pho, which is the soup, which you can eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, is delicious, and I'll have that whenever I can. So those are my two favorites. Certainly have eaten a lot of unusual things. Goat is popular there, particularly in the north. And you can have goat in the United States too. It's not uncommon, but you have it in very different ways there that we're not used to eating. Listen, you eat frog there. One of the things I found out early is if you go to a restaurant and it has fish, then the senior person at the table is honored because he's allowed to eat the fish eyeball. And so that was one of the first things they say, listen, the senior person gets to eat the fish eyeball. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm like, no, it's your honor. You get to eat this. And so they, you let you get this thing with a chopstick and you put it in your mouth and you eat it. And believe it or not, it tastes a lot like just sort of a popcorn kernel.
So is that the same thing? Because they had me eat a chicken eye.
Yeah,
so
I don't know because I've never eaten a chicken eye. So when you ate that, it's the first time I've ever seen that.
So it may not have been the most senior person at the table getting the honor of doing that.
Yeah. Well, also, first time you're on the trip would also be a reason that you would do that. I don't know what a chicken eyeball tastes like. You just sort of ate it and you said it was all right. Believe it or not, the fish eyeball is actually not that bad.
The chicken eye didn't have taste, but I did get a little sick at the end of the trip, and I think it was probably the chicken eye that did it.
I doubt it.
They gave us what they call stinky tofu there.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fermented tofu.
That was rough.
And one thing that I think I've looked back at it is, are they hazing us or are they actually like giving us things that they would eat? So when they gave us the stinky tofu, which is fermented tofu, they weren't eating it, but they were having us eat it. I actually didn't mind it because we have something similar in Chinese culture and I actually like it. That one was a little bit different. What did you think of that?
Well, I thought it was like a little bit like blue cheese times 10. And I like blue cheese. But, blue cheese is something that, blue cheese and Stilton cheese, very strong cheeses that have, significant aromas to it. And I thought it was going to be like that. So I took a relatively big bite of it, which was not a big bite, but it was pretty strong and overpowering. So yeah, you can see, I don't think it's hazing, but you could see that they're watching, the whole table is watching what's going to happen. And there's a lot of joy that they get when they see the expression on your face. I did see some people that were taking dips of it and putting it on their food, but not nearly as much as we took a sample of. But I think they ordered it because they knew it was going to be a special experience for us.
Something that we're not used to.
Yeah.
In general, though, their food is very fresh, a lot of vegetables, and it wasn't heavy. I mean, there are heavy options. We got banh mi sandwiches and it ended up being 20 cents per sandwich, which is crazy. I don't know if you could ever get a sandwich here that's 20 cents, but it was great. It was delicious. So food was great. The tourist attractions were great. Culture was great. I think all in all, I think it was a great trip. I really appreciated the opportunity for you to invite me onto this trip. We ended up leaving from Hue back to Ho Chi Minh City on Saturday. And then that Saturday night, we boarded the flight to come back to the US. And similarly, it was 2 flights, 1 layover back in Istanbul. Not as long of a layover. We got back Sunday afternoon, and I remember before I was leaving, my office was trying to figure out my schedule, and they're like, so when are you coming back? And I was like, Sunday. And they're like, when do you want us to open up your schedule again? And I was like, well, what's Dr. Montgomery doing? And we looked at your schedule, and you had a full day that next Monday, that following Monday. And I was like, well, I can't be outdone by Dr. Montgomery, so I guess I have to have a full day on Monday. And so we had full clinic days on Monday, and I thought it took me 1 or 2 days to reacclimate back to our time zone, and I could still feel the effects. That following weekend I was up in Boston for a baby shower, and it was like 2 o'clock and I just passed out, so I was still recovering, but I think I'm good now. It's a month in, I'm good.
Thank God.
I don't have the stamina that you've developed for the past since 2015.
Yeah,
but hopefully one day I will. All right, so what are your hopes for the future of the organization? You're going to Nepal, you're going to Vietnam. Are you hoping to go to any other countries?
Yeah. Last year, one of our fellows was from Kenya. And so that's definitely on my list of places to go. Either Kenya, Tanzania, another country in Africa would be a great way for us to sort of get onto that continent. And then, yeah, just other countries. I mean, certainly Central and South American countries would be great opportunities to go to. So that's just a matter of trying to find ways to sort of divide time and divide resources so that we can get people to go and teach and donate their time to go and away from their families and away from their practices to go and be part of these educational programs. But that's an important part of our outreach. One of the things that I think is important for me is probably to connect more with some of the other orthopedic outreach programs that are out there. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of programs. Our program is unique because it's a teaching program. We're not a go over there and just do surgery program and then leave. We are really going over there to figure out what they can do and then find the right candidates to bring here and then let them go back and teach. So that's the main outreach of our program, which is not something that other orthopedic programs do. But other orthopedic programs have reached out and made contacts with other countries that are established. And so reaching out to some of these other programs, Health Volunteers Overseas and Operation Walk, and some of these other programs that are already putting surgeons from around the country into different countries, I think is one of our next major steps, because it'll allow us to learn from each other in every way and also really increase that manpower, right? All these programs have relationships and willing volunteers that are going over and doing the work, and we can get them to work together with us to teach and to go on these programs. So both outreach in this country and connectivity between OrthoNations and others, as well as obviously other countries around the world. But those, I think, go together, those two.
Yeah, and I think that's a great model, because what's that saying? You give a man a fish, they eat for a day, but you teach them to fish and they eat for a lifetime. So that model is the most sustainable model, I think, and I think that's a great main mission of OrthoNations. How can our listeners contribute or get involved with OrthoNations in the future?
Yeah, I mean, an easy way to be involved or to be engaged is to look and see what we're doing, right? So we have on Instagram, we've got OrthoNations, at OrthoNations. We've got a nice web page that when we go on trips, when we're teaching, when we bring fellows here, we will put updates and information on that show what we're doing. And so if you're on Instagram, if you go to OrthoNations and you follow us, then you'll be able to get updates to what we're doing. And I think that's what a lot of people love to do when we send those things out. I get a lot of responses from people that will say, oh, it's great to see what you're doing. And that's kind of fun. It's a very easy, passive way to see what we're doing. Same thing on Facebook. We have an OrthoNations Facebook page. So whether you're more of a Facebook person or Instagram or both, would go on to those different platforms and sort of follow us. And that way you'll see what we're doing. And then, of course, with that same thing, when we have fundraisers, if you're interested in contributing in a way, I mean, obviously from a medical standpoint, if you're a medical professional and you're interested in participating from a medical standpoint, then you can reach out to us via those types of platforms, or reach out to me directly at Tri-County Orthopedics, or you at Tri-County Orthopedics, and we'd be happy to connect with you about participating clinically. If you're interested in sort of contributing and supporting the mission from a donation financial standpoint, then going to our website and there's a donation button that you can hit there. And obviously that's always greatly appreciated. It's what keeps the mission alive and keeps us going. For grateful family and friends and patients who are interested in actually putting their dollar down, that always is helpful for us.
That's awesome. I think this was a great episode. Thank you, Dr. Montgomery. And like Dr. Montgomery said, you can follow us on social media. You can follow OrthoNations on Instagram at OrthoNations. You can also follow our practice at Tri-County_orthopedics. Our social media team does a wonderful job, especially with photos from our trips, videos from our trips, and ways that you guys can contribute and help by linking to the respective websites. Thank you again for joining us on this episode. I think our listeners will really enjoy seeing how you've developed and grown this organization. It's amazing what you've done, not something that a lot of people get the opportunity to do. And so thank you, Dr. Montgomery, for doing all you do for patients here, patients in other countries. And I think this was a model for me and other doctors that are in training and early careers. So thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I mean, it was amazing to have you on our trip. You did an amazing job. It was great to sort of hang out with you and do the fun things that we do, but it was also really awesome to see you in the operating room, you know, as the professor surrounded by other people, and watch that relationship. So you're a great teacher, educator, and surgeon, but also a great friend. And so it was great to have you on that trip. So anyways, thank you for your part.
To the future.
Yeah, terrific.
So thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Stay tuned for our next episode. We have Dr. Hunt and Dr. Ginsberg discussing frozen shoulder, current concepts, management, and recommendations from our practice.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. Don't forget to share the podcast with others who might find it helpful, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Tri-County Orthopedics to stay connected. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.